is time to take you between the lines. Your host, Eric Edmondson, is getting ready to bring you stats and analysis from around the sporting world with a special guest on 98.7 for radio.
Yes, it is time to take you in between the lines on 98.7 Rural Radio WPCZ LP FM at the top of the hour. Welcome in, everybody. It's Tuesday, March 4th. Your host, Eric Evanson, here with you. And we're going to go ahead and start off our Straight Up Sports Talk show with Straight Up Sports Talk with today's headline of the day. Kyrie Irving has suffered a season-ending torn ACL injury in his left knee. The Mavs have been in the center of controversy not all season, but over the past couple months. Obviously, Luka Doncic's trade, you trade for Anthony Edwards. You think that Kyrie Irving can also get there with you and push you along the way. Now Irving's gone, and the season it kind of looks up in smoke right now. It really does look up in smoke. You trade away your future guy. Now Kyrie Irving's hurt. It's a real shame for the Mavs, and also they're pushing ticket prices up as well. So that's definitely a bummer for the fans. Feel for the city of Dallas and their basketball squad. In the NFL, a lot of franchise tags flying around. Most importantly, I would say T. Higgins has been franchise tagged for the second year in a row. The Bengals obviously do not want to get rid of him, but he wants to get paid above everything here. He's a very talented guy, probably third best wide receiver in the league, maybe definitely in the top 5, I would say. But definitely he's up there, talented guy, and it looks like that the Bengals are going to keep on holding on to him until they can build themselves a defense, because that is what they are missing the most. And our main topic of the afternoon is going to be about college basketball. We talked about college basketball a couple weeks ago. We talked about Auburn, but specifically we're going to talk about the other side of the oldest rivalry in the South with the Georgia Bulldogs, who have not been dancing since 2015, but they are on the bubble. You know, it's been an interesting couple years with UGA. They've been trying to build something. They've been, the recruiting has swirled up a little bit more. Mike White has come in, and he's really building something important for this school. And right now they are playing really meaningful basketball for this next week. Importantly, tonight as well. You have to win out if you're Georgia in order to even have a chance to make the dance. And they got 2 games ahead of them. And again, Mike White, he's building something incredible. He's been a fantastic coach for them. And the recruiting class is good. Obviously, we're going to talk about Asanul, but we also got to talk about some of the transfer people coming in as well and reshaping a lot of this team. It's just an incredible job by Mike White, by UGA so far, but they still got a lot of work ahead of them. We're going to break down what made them good to this point, what they got to accomplish later on, and, of course, what kind of basketball have they really been playing? When we come back, we're going to throw it to a quick break and, again, bring you back with some UGA college hoops talk. You're listening to Between the Lines on 98.7 Rural Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. Welcome back into Between the Lines on 98.7 Rural Radio. Eric Evanson, your host, here with you, getting ready to talk about UGA college basketball. Excuse me. So, obviously, the biggest upset for UGA in a long time, and in fact, it's been called a program-defining win last time against Florida. Go ahead and listen to this call for the game winner, what it would turn out to be.
Back to Blue Kane. They leave him open for 3. Got it! Dogs back out in front by 1.
One from the around the arc to push yourself up. That's huge. The Dogs have been building something fun. They're a fun basketball team, but they're still a very young basketball team. And I want to stress this because there are a lot of flaws in this team that are very trademark or hallmark of a young basketball team. But before we get into them completely, we're going to break down the top rankings right now. Going to give you the top 10, and then we'll break down the BPI as well. Been quite a shakeup since we last talked. So here's the top 10. Auburn, Duke, Houston, Tennessee, Florida, St. John's, Alabama, Michigan State, Texas Tech, and Iowa State. And then for the BPI top 10, it's Duke, Houston, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, Iowa State, Arizona, Texas Tech, and Gonzaga. And again, none of those teams that we just mentioned are the team that we're talking about this afternoon, which are the UGA Bulldogs. Why are we picking them? Well, because the SEC is a burgeoning conference. We read off those names, and I'm sure you notice a lot of SEC schools. And, of course, when we think SEC, maybe the first thing that comes to mind is football. And what SEC team is running the football game right now other than the Georgia Bulldogs, and maybe Texas as well is in there. But Georgia, for years on the hoops end, has been lacking. So they're trying to push forward, and this year it feels like a huge step forward, even if they don't go dancing this year. This is a huge program-defining year of saying, okay, we know what it's like to win. We know what it's like to be in a tough conference, because that's exactly what the SEC right now is an incredibly tough conference. They lost Alabama. They just got by against Texas. They were able to pull away from them. It was a great game to keep them alive and keep their hopes alive. They got 2 more SEC games against South Carolina along with Vanderbilt, and, of course, the big win against Florida last week. And, again, they're not in the top 10 for either the BPI or just the regular AP poll. So why do we bring them up? Because they haven't danced since 2015. Again, they're going through a lot of changes. New coach, Mike White, we talked about him. He's a great coach. He's brought in a lot of new talent, including Asa Newell and some transfer portal guys, including Silas Demery Jr. He has been an absolute strength for the team. He's gotten up there. He leads the team in assists. He's a great counterpart to Asa Newell, who is one of the most exciting freshmen in the country, I would say. I don't think you can, deny that right now. The kid has a lot of growing pains to get through, yeah, but when you're leading your team in almost every other statistical and offensive category, I don't know if you have, your head kind of deserves to be that big, right? You're doing this. You're pushing your team that far. And UGA had a lot of expectation coming in. They were ranked 45 coming into the preseason poll, which is right on the cusp of making the tournament. And like I said, they still have a lot to work on. And let's go ahead and dig into Asa Newell's game. He's averaging 28 minutes this season. He averages 15 points a game, which is 14th in the SEC as a freshman. And we talked about Janai Broom a couple weeks ago and how he shoots around 50% from field goal range. Well, Asa Newell's shooting 55% from field goal range. And again, if you're doing anything at or above 50% in any kind of sports, with the right sample size, you are doing fantastic. You're doing a great job. And Newell, and this is something that surprised me as well, is, Newell is also up there with the rebounds. He's team leader in rebounds. He averages 6.8 a game, which is around 7. He's up there doing it on both ends of the ball. Now, I think that might be a little bit on the detriment of the defensive side for Georgia. Again, they're still a young team. They have a lot of growing pains to get through. So I think that if you can fix themselves on the defensive end by getting them more rebounds, by forcing a lot more pressures, and, of course, limiting the turnovers. The turnovers have killed the Georgia Bulldogs a good bit this year. So I think that you just really need to focus on making sure that they are not going to kill you later on. So, again, the Dogs, they played a couple of very important games recently. Most recently, the Florida win, which was, again, I said in the open, has seen as a program-defining win. I mean, just listen to the crowd here as they storm the court. You got to love the energy. You got to love the energy of a college basketball crowd. And it's huge. I think there was video that surfaced of Kirby Smart. He was holding he was at the game. He was holding everybody back, saying, "Don't do it. We don't want to get a fine. Let's not storm it just yet, guys. Everybody, let's calm down. Let it simmer for a moment." So obviously the fans are all into it. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of this is that Georgia fans have been wanting this for a long time. And you're finally getting it. You're finally getting some good basketball in your home arena, good, exciting basketball to watch. Look, Georgia fans are spoiled as is. I mean, they had a good run in the College World Series last year, baseball-wise. They're going to be in the playoffs just about every single year with the new playoff format for football. They're eating good, so why not just make the rich richer and give them a playoff basketball team as well? But that basketball team still has a lot of important games to play. Most importantly, because it's the next game up, are the South Carolina squad that they will be facing tonight. They're 2-14 coming in. South Carolina is, so it's not necessarily an easy win, because especially when you're playing right now against an SEC opponent in a year where you haven't been fantastic against SEC opponents, it isn't going to be a slam dunk victory. You still have a lot to push for in that game, but it definitely is a little bit better for them. And of course, they have Vanderbilt coming up as well. Vanderbilt a little bit better in the conference. They were 8-8 this year, and Georgia has had a kind of a heat streak going on. It's just 2 wins for them, but one over Florida, one over Texas that they really just ran away with after a very good first half. But before that, you lose to Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Mizzou, who beat Alabama most recently, and then of course you lose to Auburn. Auburn, what can you do against Auburn, man? They're the number 1 team in the country for 7 straight weeks now in a row for a reason. They're a powerhouse. They are a wagon. They're going to be a threat. So I don't think anyone's taken aback by that loss, but it certainly hurts when you go into that 4-game losing streak, and it just makes the Florida win all that more impressive that you come in with 0 head of steam off of a road trip. You're going back on the road next time out as well. And Florida, they're a good team. They're a great team. They have been. They have been there before. They know how to win. They know how to be sturdy, and you did a good job to disrupt that motion. The path is in front of them, and it is all to be decided. They have a very tough fight coming up. Next up, we have our special guest of the afternoon, which is Mr. Hank Tatum, who covers Dogs Hoops with Dog Central. So stay tuned for that, and keep it right here on Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. Welcome back into Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio, and with us is our special guest of the week, Mr. Hank Tatum. Hank, thank you for joining us. I know it's a busy schedule for you, but going to talk about some Dogs Hoops.
Yeah, good to be here. I appreciate you having me on, and good time to talk about it after the big win on Tuesday night.
Absolutely. Hey, let's go ahead and roll into that big win on Tuesday night. Obviously, court storming. It was huge over Florida, who's been one of the more dominant in the SEC, in which it has been a conference that has kind of awoken in terms of college basketball, with Auburn, Alabama, Florida. Tennessee's also hanging around. So being down on there and covering that big game, what was that like for the Dogs?
I think that it was a program-defining or season-defining win for the team. Since Mike White got to Georgia now in his 3rd season, has yet to beat his previous team in Florida. It had been a 12-game losing streak to the rival Gators. And so not only is it nice to always beat them for this Georgia program, but this is a season where everything started out so well for Georgia. It was the best start in almost 100 years, and things quickly turn south as you get to the SEC play. Like you mentioned, it's the best conference in basketball history right now. So things had just started to unravel. There had been some blown leads, and I think that Georgia was up to 3 or 4 straight losses coming into that game. On the outside, all of a sudden, looking into the NCAA tournament. So that one gets you right back in on the bubble. It's a first top 3 win, I think even top 5 win in program history since 2004. So big win all around, and I think it gets the fans right back into Georgia basketball this season, and it gives Georgia a really solid chance to make the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely. You're completely right. We had a guy who follows Auburn pretty closely, formerly went to Auburn and covered them, and he said he was pretty frank about it as well. He doesn't hide his dislike for Georgia, but hey, he said that White was probably the best thing that happened to this team. What overall has changed in terms of the culture, or is it more just what's on the court?
I think it's a mix of both. If you go back to the Tom Crean days, pre-Mike White, there's just a massive culture change in this program right now. And a lot of that started with Silas Demery, Blue Kane, and Dylan James, who are sophomores on this current team that came in as freshmen last year and really kind of led that team deep in that NIT run, which has kind of set the tone for this year. Then you get Asa Newell in here as a freshman this year. He's the 2nd highest recruit in program history behind Anthony Edwards. So a lot has changed. And so for Mike White, he's kind of turned a program that should be towards the top, just in terms of the resources you have in the athletic department, but was under Tom Crean that final year, the worst team in SEC history. and he's taken it back to now fighting to get back to the NCAA tournament. So Mike White has done a lot for this Georgia program and has made significant strides year in and year out now in his third season.
Absolutely, and I don't think you can speak enough for what the job that he's done, especially if the Dogs go dancing this year, to which, like you said, it's been tough in SEC play, but this was a very hyped-up Georgia team coming into the season. I do think that's pretty warranted. I mean, they're still trying to get their legs underneath them, but from covering the team with Dog Central, what have you seen from the start of the season up until now that has changed, or is it just that they're still knocking on the door, they just can't open it yet?
Yeah, it's hard. I think especially what makes the SEC so great this season there's a lot of experience. I mean, you look at Auburn, and there are some guys, I think their average age is like, 20 between 23 and 24 years old. So there's a lot of experience across the entire league. And Georgia just doesn't really have that. They've had some sophomores who made the deep NIT run, but Asa Newell, Somto Cyril are freshmen, a lot of transfers that came in, and that's what's kind of hurt the team. But there's definitely a lot more talent that this team has had in years. And so that's what's helped propel them to where they are right now. But as we've seen the season progress, not only is it an extremely difficult schedule, you've had to go on the road to Auburn, you've had to go on the road to Tennessee, to Florida, you've had to play Auburn twice, Florida twice, just a ridiculous schedule, but such is life in the SEC this year. You've started to see a lot of the young mistakes of this team, and a lot of that has taken heed in second half blown leads. There have been multiple times Georgia's let it break, or at least kind of been tied right in there, and it's just kind of a collapse towards the end. And it looked like we were getting there against Florida, but seeing this team since the bye week take a big stride where they played Auburn really well on the road and then were able to hold off Florida to secure the win.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of growing pains to do with this team, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that, maybe 4 years into it, you would maybe 3 years into it, you want a little bit more. But I think in the fourth year, I really expect them to take a big leap. Obviously, you said, you mentioned Otsa Newell, who is the second highest recruiting program history. When guys like that succeed, you start to recruit more, you keep getting younger, and eventually you start to build a really good team. And in the SEC, it's become one of the better conferences, if not the best conference in college basketball right now. What with Purdue on an off year, Duke also somewhat on an off year, that ACC is starting to dwindle a little bit more. So the SEC has kind of had the doorway open for them. But playing in this tougher conference, do you think this is an iron sharpens iron situation for Georgia, or is this just something where they're going to have to get better?
Well, I think it's more of an iron sharpens iron, but that Florida win was so monumental because I think that if Georgia had dropped that game, especially in the way that it started to happen, where they had a 26-point lead in the first half, and all of a sudden Florida's got a lead with a minute to go in the game. If Georgia had dropped that game, ultimately, I think that the wheels could have started to fall off, and that you've now strung together multiple losses. You're still on the outside looking in. But now with that win, I think that Georgia gets back into it and gets that much needed energy to close out these final three games. And ultimately you're starting to see improvements, especially since that bye week, where Georgia didn't have a midweek game, had some time to regroup and try some different things at practice. And since then they've faced the number 1 and number 3 teams in the country, but the product on the court has looked much better than it had in recent weeks.
They certainly do look a lot more hardened. And you know what? You mentioned we're in the final stretch of things here. What is it going to take for Georgia, should they make this, to make a, not a statement run, but definitely a saying, we're here if they lace up the dancing shoes?
Yeah, I mean, and we'll just start with this, and that I think that obviously a lot of Georgia fans want to see Georgia back in March Madness in the tournament. It's going to be the first time, if they do it, since 2016. But the fact that this program right now is playing meaningful basketball in late February, early March is a step in the right direction no matter what. That hasn't happened in multiple years. But to get back to the NCAA tournament and snap that drought, which is the longest in the conference, Georgia, in these last 3 games, if Georgia wins out at Texas, at South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, to me, they're a lock no matter what happens in the SEC tournament. If they win 2 games there and they lose 1, you're probably in, but you might need 1 in the SEC tournament. I think 1 in the SEC tournament would guarantee you. And then anything less than that, 1 and 2 and 0 and 3, and it's going to be tough sledding to get into the big dance. I think that one of the biggest things about Georgia's resume right now is when you look at it and compare it to others on Selection Sunday, as of right now, this is what Georgia has going for them. They've got a win over the number 3 team in the country, the number 7 team in the country, and the number 17 team in the country. Not many others can say that they have 3 wins like that. And then also, in Quad 1, Georgia only has 3 wins, but all of their losses are Quad 1 in the net rankings. Georgia is perfect in Quad 2, 3, and 4 this season. And all of that is to say that Georgia doesn't have a bad loss. All of their losses this season have been to quality teams. And so that's where I think the resume might separate itself when we get to Selection Sunday.
We definitely will see about Selection Sunday coming up. Hank, any final thoughts? And if not, just tell the people where to find your work.
Yeah, head over to Dog Central. All the articles there from games and recaps. Media availabilities are free. Eric, as always, appreciate the time to talk about some college hoops.
Absolutely. Hank, thank you so much for coming on the show. That's Hank Tatum, writer for Dog Central. We're going to throw it to a quick break, then bring you out with some games to watch for the rest of your week. Keep it right here on Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. Welcome back into Between the Lines on 98.7 Roar Radio. Eric Evanson, your host, here with you on our final segment. Just going to do a little bit of a roundup and then send you out for the rest of your week. Let's talk about the top 3 teams in the country so far: Auburn, Duke, and Houston. That's by the AP poll, by the BPI. I believe they're the same as well. Either way, these are 2 of the most powerful teams and teams that you need to look out for. Auburn, SEC champs, man. We talked about them at length, ad nauseum, a couple weeks ago. They're a fantastic squad. Some may say that they have the National Player of the Year on their team. Some might agree as well, because that's not a crazy statement. Brune's been fantastic on both ends of the ball. And then you have Duke. Duke has also been fantastic. They're going to win the ACC. They're 18-1 in that conference. The next closest is Clemson. Louisville has also taken a huge rise out of nowhere. I believe they've climbed 10 spots in the team AP in the coaches AP poll. That comes off the back of their latest winning streak. They haven't lost since they lost to Georgia Tech, which was obviously, a minute ago. Along the way of that, they beat Miami, they beat Notre Dame, FSU, Pitt. No, not powerhouse schools, but schools that aren't, they're not pushovers, right? Chucky Hepburn has been fantastic for that team. He leads them in points with 16 points a game. You also have Terrence Edwards, who's just under the 50% mark in terms of field goal. He's averaging about 43. And then Houston. Man, Houston has been kind of a sleeper cell, I think. Excuse me. I feel like they've been slept on a good bit. They're also on one heck of a winning streak. They have not lost since they lost to number 22 Temple. And that was a 1-point loss at that. And before that, the last time they lost, you got to go all the way back to when they played San Diego State. They have not had a blowout loss all season long. If you want to call the loss to Auburn towards the beginning of the year a blowout loss, they lost 74-69. You certainly can if you want to. I'm not going to count it as that because every game has been within 5 or 6 points. When they lost, they've been a fantastic squad. They've been rolling. LJ Cryer's been fantastic for them. I picked Houston last year, not to make it all the way, but to push their way towards the Final Four. But again, there's a reason why I want to predict sports. That's a hard thing to predict, but they are doing great. And something that was brought to my attention last time we talked about college hoops was St. John's, the Red Storm. They've been also very solid. They're going to win the Big East, it looks like. They're 17-2. The next closest 13-5 Marquette. So I don't know if there's necessarily a competition with them. They're also on a bit of a winning streak. The last time they lost was to Villanova, but they've beaten UConn along the way. UConn, of course, pretty dang good. They've beaten Creighton. The Jays have been off and on this year, but nothing to sleep on at all. And hey, when you bring in R.J. Lewis into the tournament, averaging 17 points a game, it's going to be hard to beat. They are a difficult team to beat all in all. Give you some games to watch before we head out of here, and really just want to highlight the big. Obviously, there's full slate of spring training still happening for baseball. No football, unfortunately. NBA still rolling. They're starting to not wind things down, but they're getting towards the end of the tunnel. Full slate of college basketball. But obviously tonight in Columbia, the Bulldogs, our subject of today's show, will be taking on South Carolina to really keep their season alive. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us. But before we head out of here, just want to say no show next week. We will be on spring break here on campus, so no show for us next week. You can keep up with the Instagram at EOTC Between the Lines on when we will be back. Of course, it's just going to be a week. We'll be back right after that. And for that one, looks like we're going to be diving into a little bit of the NHL. So, hey, if you're an NHL fan or if you know an NHL friend, please let them know. We're going to be talking about that, hopefully, when we come back from spring break. Obviously, spring break things, might shake things up, might shake some stuff up, might switch some things around. But either way, folks, thank you for tuning in today. It's been a fantastic time getting to talk some college hoops with you. Hope you feel the exact same. And again, make sure you check out the Instagram, EOTC Between the Lines. Make sure you're checking out the Dogs playing in Columbia, South Carolina this evening. That's going to be a fun show. And check out our guest, Hank Tatum, who writes for Dog Central. It's always a pleasure to have him on. But, folks, make sure you tell a friend, tell a family member, hey, what do I say? What do I say about the third one? Don't you ever forget to tell a friend of me that you were Between the Lines. Have a good one, folks.
Thanks for tuning in this week on Between the Lines. Tune in next week for another great guest and another great show. Check out the show on Instagram and YouTube at EOTC Between the Lines. Until next time, everyone, stay safe, make good decisions, watch sports, and as always, have a good one.